Hello and welcome to the RPG Academy podcast Twitch channel. My name is Michael, and we are here tonight, if the internet gods will allow us, for Detention live. Joining me, as always, is my regular co-host Chris. Chris, say hello to everyone.
Hello, everyone.
And joining us tonight as a special guest is Jack. Jack, say hello to everyone.
Hello.
All right. So just for really quick, pretty short, who's Jack? What is it you're currently working on?
Yeah, so hi, I'm T Crusading on Twitter, but I'm one half of Cobblepath Games. We're a TTRPG studio. Currently we're working on a few things. The big one is we've just done a Zine Quest Kickstarter for a one-shot campaign for our horror system that we released in, I think it was January, it might have been February. But very recently we released our horror system Locus, and we've done a zine quest for a one shot for it, which we're currently in the process of writing alongside some other stuff. That's the sort of forefront thing.
Well, we're very happy to have you tonight. So it is like 2 a.m. where Jack is. So did you stay up, or did you go to sleep and then wake up to be here?
I had a couple of hours nap in the evening, partly because I was just knackered for some reason. But yeah, I pretty much just stayed up.
Very cool. So we are going to try to power through, even if the stream gets really weird and wonky. We're going to just keep going because these will go up on YouTube eventually, and they'll be an audio only. But we're really hopeful that the stream will be good enough. Right? It's still green. It's been green since we went live. So fingers crossed. It won't. Now, as I say that, I'm sure it'll get terrible. But it does look like we have a few people watching, so thank you for joining. Feel free to jump into chat and say hello, but lurkers are completely welcome. But it's nice to know if we see you there. We'll try to recognize you as best we can. So we start the show, as we always do, with Extracurricular, and this is where we just kind of talk a little bit about what we've been up to lately. It could be a movie that you've watched recently, a new TV show you're into, books, health, fitness, just basically anything you want to share. And I'll start with Chris today. Chris, so what have you been up to, buddy?
Well, some guy got me playing some tabletop simulator, so now I'm a touch obsessed with this DC deck builder and Marvel United. I won't point fingers at the guy that's the normal host of the show that got me into those games, but been having a lot of fun doing that. Getting back with the Boy Scouts. We're doing some meetings when the weather's nice because we're outdoors, staying 10 feet apart, trying to follow all the rules for that. Other than that, just a lot of work. Not a ton else right now.
Well, that sounds like a lot. Sounds like quite a lot, actually.
Keeps me busy.
Yes. Well, actually, Jack, if you don't mind, why don't you go ahead and do yours? I got a little message I got to respond to, unfortunately. So yeah, go ahead and tell us what you've been up to lately.
So the biggest thing, I guess, is that I've recently started playing Minecraft for the first time, and it's pretty good. I enjoy it. I've been making lots of stuff. I've got a big underground goblin city on our friend's server. Sort of found a big crevasse under the ground, and I've built big stone things in the sides. But obviously, I'm plugging away at the tabletop RPG stuff, so writing things. I've been doing an artwork for one of our backers from the Locus Kickstarter, who paid to make a monster with us. So we've made a monster, and I've been drawing that up in the last couple of days, which has taken actually a lot of time. Nice. Yeah, those are sort of the biggest things. Sort of a couple of horror movies we've been sort of we managed to track down because we like our horror movies, and my the other half of Cobblepath, Steph, is big on at the moment trying to hunt down obscure ones. So we got one called Pulse or Cairo, which is one of the big famous thing. I can't remember if it was Korean or if it was Japanese, which is terrible of me. But it's one of the sort of the famous ones, and we finally managed to track it down because they made an American remake, and then they made 2 sequels to the American remake.
Of course,
the original doesn't have any sequels, but the American remake has sequels. And I thought it was a film I'd seen years ago, and it wasn't. I'd never seen it. And honestly, we weren't particularly impressed. We thought it had a fair few problems. It had some really cool scenes, like individual scenes in it. But overall, the kind of like the story was a bit muddled, and the characters weren't particularly well fleshed out, and it was really weirdly shot in a way that was like genuinely confusing to watch, in not in an intentional, oh, it's a horror film sort of way, but in a someone's running down a corridor and suddenly I can't tell where they are sort of way, which was not great. But the new mystery is, what was the film I watched when I was younger? Because we don't know what it is. We can't figure it out. I have no clue. So at some point we'll have to hunt that down as well. But
ask the Twitterverse. You'll probably get 1,000 responses, and one of them might be right.
Yeah,
that's true. Yeah, probably should actually take it to Twitter. See whether anybody knows it.
Random, did either of you ever watch the TV show Married with Children?
Yes.
Yes.
So there's an episode that you just made me think of where Al Bundy has got a little tune in his head for a song, and he's trying to track down the song. So he's going to he's calling radio stations, but all he can remember is he goes, him. And that's what he does over and over. And it's clearly not enough to give anyone any idea of what it is. And I think it even, my memory, he'll hear the song on the radio, but then they don't ever tell the name of the song. Like it keeps getting interrupted or cut off. But just something about you said, it's like, him, trying to figure out what that is. Maybe came to the top of mind. So lights are still green. So again, traps are clean. I guess we will continue to push on. As for myself, I feel like I've covered this so much recently because I've been doing all those Patreon exclusive podcasts where I've been catching up with everybody. And like each time I talk about what I've been up to. So I feel like I've already said this like 12 times. So I guess the thing that happened today that I haven't talked about yet is I watched Kong versus Godzilla on HBO Max. It just came out today. No spoilers to anything. My review is that it's a grade A nonsense. And whether that's good or bad will depend on your personal predilections of those types of movies. But it absolutely is nonsense, top to bottom, left to right. Beyond that, I'm gearing up to go up to Cincinnati again. I have a doctor's appointment, and my son has a doctor's appointment on Friday. And his is like 8 a.m. It's a 3-hour drive. So we're actually going to go tomorrow night, spend the night in a hotel, and then do all the doctor stuff on Friday. So be out on the road. So hopefully that will go fine. I'm sure the kid will be watching movies in the back the entire time. And then I'm watching YouTube when we're in the hotel. So it'll be like I'm by myself. I'll listen to a bunch of podcasts or something maybe. All right. So we're going to move into our first improv game, which is called 10 Things. And this is an improv game where we will take turns prompting one another to try to come up with 10 things that fit the prompt. The idea here is immediacy over accuracy. So coming up with a list of 10 things quickly is more important than coming up with a list of 10 things that actually make sense to the prompt. Quickly, shout out to New York Tater jumping in the chat. Thank you, New York Tater, for being here. We always appreciate having you. So Jack, you're the guest. So you can go first, second, or third in terms of giving someone a prompt or receiving the prompt. I'm not exactly sure how that works out. But where would you like to go?
I will give a prompt first.
All right. So you can choose either Chris or myself, and then we'll go from there and circle back. And then that means you will go last in terms of actually giving the list. So who do you want to prompt, and what is the prompt?
So I'll prompt you, Mike.
Okay.
And I want you to give me 10 terrible improvised weapons.
A dirty sock.
1.
A clean sock.
2.
The foot that was in the dirty sock.
3.
A goblin.
4.
Banana.
5.
A hammock.
6.
A very large rock that's too heavy to actually hold.
7.
A small rock that's too light to do any damage.
8.
The paladin.
9.
And rose petals.
10.
Dead, yay!
Nice.
Those are all very terrible improvised weapons. All right, so Chris, I will then give you your prompt, and then you will complete the circle by giving Jack a prompt. So we'll stick with movies. Jack was talking a lot about horror movies. So Chris, give me 10 horror movies that you like.
Ooh, the original Friday the 13th,
1,
The Exorcist,
2,
The Exorcist 3,
3,
not 2, wasn't good. Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
4,
Um, Phantasm.
5.
Ball.
Yes.
What wasn't supposed to be Critters.
6,
Sorority House Slasher.
7,
Nightmare on Elm Street.
8,
That's a good classic one. We'll go with Gremlins.
9,
Supposed to be. And we'll go with my graduation videotape.
10. Those in fact 10 things. Excellent. All right, Chris, you will prompt Jack, please.
All right, Jack. How about 10 games that you'd like to play?
I'd like to play. Oh no. Okay, newest Hitman 3. Haven't got that yet. Monster Hunter Rise, because I haven't got that yet. Super Mario 3D World, because I never got a chance to get it.
3,
The next unreleased Metroid Prime, because I've been waiting for that for years.
4,
Hollow Knight Silk Song, again not released yet, but really can't wait for it.
5.
Play most of the games I want to play. What else? The new DLC for The Outer Worlds.
6.
Technically not a game, it's fine. I would like to play Breath of the Wild 2.
7.
And that comes out. That was there was a glimmer of something there. What was it? No. Still waiting to get the chance to play Evil Genius. Never played it. And Ori and the Blind Forest 2.
9.
9.
And finally something else. I guess Resident Evil 7-ish, maybe.
10.
Hey!
Yay! That, in fact, was 10 things. Excellent. Well, thank you for playing our little reindeer games. There'll be more later for those of you sticking around for the back half of the show. All right, so now we're going to move into what we call used books, and this is usually the biggest portion of the show, kind of the meat and potatoes, as I like to say. And this is where we're going to talk about a previous game or campaign that we either played in or ran. And the idea is that we're trying to mine this experience for things that either went really well that we have tried to bring into future games, or maybe something that didn't go so well and we have learned to avoid it for future games. Jack, you once again are the guest. Do you have a campaign or a game or something you can talk about tonight?
So the one that I think I'll bring up is our technically still ongoing, but under hiatus because of lockdown, Scion first edition game, which is about 5 years old. 6 years. I think we've been doing it about 6 years now. And there's quite a lot sort of in there, but the thing that I sort of thought would be an interesting sort of thing to discuss, because it's come up a fair amount, especially with my character, of balancing characters' role play, like the role play of what a character would do, with how that affects the table and the players and the game in general. Because there's a lot of sort of talk about it, and I think the typical take on it is it's what my character would do is a shit excuse. Sorry, is a bad excuse. And I think that a lot of the time it is, but it kind of depends on the game you're playing. Because with our Scion game, there's a lot more of the core of the actual roleplay game we're playing is kind of about the character dynamics of the party clashing against each other and pulling multiple allegiances, sort of thing. So the idea of characters sort of like standing up for what they think they need to do and like being sort of like going against the main party for things is something that is a lot more ingrained in the story we have decided to tell as a group and the sort of setup of the world and the concept of the role play, in a way that it doesn't for your sort of more traditional party-based dungeon crawly kind of things where, yeah, if your rogue's going to just rob everyone blind and leave, it kind of doesn't work anymore. I mean, granted, if one of the characters did that in our game, it probably wouldn't work anymore either. He'd probably get kicked out of the group. But we've had points where characters have been at odds with each other quite strongly. My character in particular he has the strongest moral compass of the party. So there's been a lot of points where he has kind of either refused to do something or tried to stop the party from doing stuff, and has been at odds with them. It's never kind of ended up in a full-on brawl, which is good because it probably wouldn't end well. But it's I thought it was kind of interesting because there's been a little bit of a balance with it as well, because my character has ended up being a bit of a force of personality, and he's very much about, he wants to be friends with people. And I should probably actually cover what the actual setting of the game is for people who don't know, because people might know Scion because it recently was on Kickstarter for the 2nd edition. But it's quite a different game, as I understand it. But basically the idea is we're all children of gods, and they are the sort of real world pantheons of gods. So you pick a pantheon and then you're a child of a specific god. And then you start as a hero who's like a just slightly better than human with a couple of powers sort of person. You advance up through demigod and eventually ascend to be a god in your own right. And we're all gods now in the group, but we've done the whole kind of journey from being heroes up through gods. And there's been a lot of kind of like grey area. Who are the bad guys? Who are the good guys? Like, are the gods the good guys? Are these guys the bad guys? Are Titans actually bad guys? And there's been a lot of kind of like, especially with the different pantheons, because my character's from the Celtic pantheon, the Tuatha Dé Danann. But we've got people from the Egyptian pantheon, and they don't get on because they have very different worldviews. And then we got like some Norse character, and we've got someone from the Voodoo thing. We've got a Greek Scion, and my character, and like in the Celtic pantheon, there's a lot more what are called Titan spawn, which are kind of like your traditional monsters. They're basically the children of Titans, but en masse. In a lot of pantheons, they are essentially just bad guys. The Celtic pantheon has a lot more of the sort of like, hey, they're just kind of like other people that we live with. Like, trolls aren't necessarily evil, they're just another group of people down the road. So my character's been a lot more kind of like immediately welcoming, but he's also like generally doesn't want to kill people. He wants to give people chances. So he's ended up with a lot of fights where the party's like, we have to kill this person because they're really bad and they're really dangerous. And he's been like, could we not? Like, maybe we can convince them to be friends. It will be fine. And then he'll try it and it won't work. Or sometimes it does. There's a lot of people that begrudgingly like him, I think. Like a lot of characters who have ended up kind of like being like, yeah, all right, fine, I guess we're technically on the same side. I don't like that I don't hate you. But there's been a lot of that kind of balance, and there's also been a lot of points where I've been very aware that I am hogging table time because my character's insisting on doing stuff where like the rest of the characters kind of like, we're just ready to go and fight, and my character's like, no, I must talk these people round, and that's something that I try to stop. Like, I try to stop my character taking up so much time when it's just my character taking up time. But the nature of how the game works means that there's a lot of individual characters, not just mine. Like nearly everybody has individual stuff they're off doing because we're all gods, and like we all have our own pantheons and our own parents and our own allegiances, and a lot of the role play ends up being us chatting with the people that only really matter to our character, or okay, specifically to do with our character. Because I mean, I think now technically we're all from completely different pantheons, because my character ended up kind of like side shuffling into the British pantheon rather than the Celtic. So like he's actually King Arthur now. It was a thing. It's a whole thing. But he's like in charge of the British stuff now. And his brother, who's one of the other members of the party, is still full on Celtic, so he's in the Irish bit, and I'm in the British bit, and they're connected. But there's a lot of stuff that goes on that only really applies to one of us.
Right.
I think. So.
All right. Well, I think there's two main topics there that I think would be fun to explore a little bit. One is the obvious. If you have a game where PvP, whether it's role play or actual combat, is kind of part of the game, how do you navigate that so that everyone's still having fun and no one gets their feelings hurt? And then the other thing that you kind of touched on was like spotlight sharing, where you have one character who, just by nature of the campaign, or maybe a particular session, or maybe like 2 or 3 sessions in a row, is sort of getting more spotlight than the others.
Yeah.
But the player themselves isn't necessarily doing anything wrong. But how do you still manage that when you have an ensemble cast? Because games like this aren't movies; they're not novels, where you can serve that easier when you have other people who are just there waiting for their turn to do stuff. So I'll start with you, Chris. Do you have any thoughts on either or both of those topics, either some experiences you've had or just some advice you would offer?
I've played a character similar to that, kind of the face of the party. Actually, I play a lot of them because that's one of my favorite roles. The biggest trick I've learned is your character has to find a way to pull the other characters into the scene when you're trying to negotiate. And you have to kind of learn how, all right, are we going to negotiate with an iron fist this time? Okay, barbarian, you're up front with me, look intimidating. And whenever I say, thunder, stomp your foot, or, whatever, for example. Or are we going to go more of the quiet, maybe seductive way? Well, you bring, the pretty character that Michael's probably playing to the table and have him, use his smooth charm and try to talk, help you talk your way through it type thing. And that can be a tricky thing if the other players aren't used to doing that. As far as the player versus player, as long as everybody's game for it, have fun. I've done that. I mean, there are whole systems that are designed to kind of compete for the spotlight and compete for a little bit of PvP. If that's what your table's having fun doing, go for it. But definitely do, Michael's favorite thing, session 0, and make sure that everybody's cool with it.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that's it's easy to say that, and it is because we say it all the time. You have a session 0 and you explain all that. But I think when you're dealing with people, what can happen is the DM or the players get together and you say, hey, I'm thinking about playing this particular game or this particular type of game. And there's going to be more likely moments of conflict within the party. Is everyone cool with it? And everyone's like, yeah, that sounds cool. That'll be fun. And then when you actually get in those moments, someone gets their feelings hurt. Someone gets upset because, they signed up for PvP, but they didn't sign up to lose when it came time to PvP. That the dice don't fall in their favor or whatever the case may be, depending on the game you're playing. Then it still kind of sucks. It still kind of feels bad. It's like, it's still going to feel something. So how do you, I think setting up for success is key with, again, the session 0, ding, everyone take a drink, where you explain how the game will work. But I also think that's where you either need safety tools or just like check-ins. Like, so that was pretty intense, Jack. Your character just got beat up on, role play wise. 4 other characters tried to talk you down and shout you down. And, we all were in it. It was exciting and dramatic. It was great for like us as an audience. But let's take a couple minutes here. Everyone calm down. Let's go get some snacks. And let's make sure that we're all in the right frame of mind before we move on. Because, to use like a movie parable or metaphor or whatever example, like a scene, the big dramatic scene in the movie where everybody kind of fights against each other, that might be like a week of shooting. In the movie theater, it's going to take 5-10 minutes, but people are going to have weeks to prepare for that particular moment. They're going to have time to recover after that moment. It's not the same, even though it might feel the same because it's performative. And in your head, you're like, oh, we're recreating a scene from a TV show or recreating a scene from a movie. But I think in those movies, you can distance yourself from those emotions. And also these, are trained actors. They probably are better at it than those of us who do this as a hobby. So I would just advise, again, setting yourself up for success, but then also, stopping when you need to, doing check-ins when you need to, and just make sure that everyone is having fun. Because I don't particularly enjoy those types of games, but I see their value. For the right game, for the right group, you're going to get more dramatic role play, maybe some, more emotional investment and reward from playing those types of games versus saying, okay, everyone has to be friends all the time, like I normally do, like in my D&D games. So I'm missing out on the opportunity for some great role play, but I'm also missing out on the opportunity for someone to go home and get upset, and it causes a fracture of the group. Spotlight sharing, I think that's players' maturity plays a big part of that, and the recognition that, hey, I realize I have been spotlighting for a while, and to Chris's point, like, how can I bring other people in? And one of the things that I have found I like to do is I like to set other people up. And in particular, there's an example. I got to play at a one-shot at a convention once with someone who was a fan of the show, really liked, basically kind of wanted me to play in a game with them and their kids. I said, sure. And they were not quite as, not as excited about it, but they weren't quite as extroverted as I was in the game. And I was playing a bard. So the way I worked that out is I basically forced us to go into a story where everything revolved around me giving a performance. And I don't remember all the details, but basically the game hinged on me having this great performance to make someone in the crowd, be happy. And then once we set up all the stakes, my character left. And so the other characters had to fill in for the performance. So each of them were like, I guess my character can juggle, and I guess my character could tell jokes. And so it very much pushed them into the scene where they had to then do everything they were setting my character up to do. And then I showed up at the end and, kind of right back around. So that's just a way of saying, how can I still do my character but push someone else into the spotlight that they want to be in? I mean, I never want someone to feel uncomfortable. And I think in this case, it worked out very well, but I could see how it could backfire. So Jack, so you kind of started things off. So are there any particular lessons learned that you did that, yes, that helped, or I wish now we would have done that to help either of those issues you talked about?
Well, I mean, one thing is, I think, for one, I'm really glad that it's a role play between a group of friends that already know each other. It wasn't a stranger's game. So that makes a massive change in how approachable and how applicable that kind of role play is, and how easy it is to set up. But I think part of it was also just, I'm really glad that the way we've never done the PvP with the understanding that anyone's going to die. And I think we've only really had maybe one actual fight between two characters that was serious. And even then, it was one character who was screaming for another one to attack them, and the other one wasn't. It was, yeah. So we've never actually done the full-on PvP, which is a thing that I'm not hugely excited about myself anyway. I think very few systems are set up to actually accommodate it well. And nobody wants to lose a character from that, unless it's the culmination of a lot of stuff and it's the kind of game you're playing. But I think most of it's about understanding the kind of game you're playing, understand what it is that the group is, the group dynamic is, understand the kind of story that's being told by your session, and also I mean, this is the designer in me coming out, but also understand the kind of like limitations and um, core game styles of the system you're playing. Because, for example, like you say, you want everybody to be friends in D&D. I would completely agree. I don't think D&D works very well. The mechanics setup it has really really benefits from having a party that is all on the same team and is setting out for a goal. It works really well when you do that, and it kind of doesn't work particularly well when you do something else. It's just not really built to do that, and that's fine because every game is going to be built for different stuff. But I think there's a lot to be gained from understanding what it is that the game you're playing is built to do. And sort of what the setting works with things as well. So yeah, slightly rambly lessons, I guess.
No worries. One thing I wanted to touch on. You just mentioned about how this is a game between friends, and I completely agree with that. But there is also a cautionary tale, and I believe I've told this story before, but it might have been years ago. But early on in my relationship with my wife, when we were just started dating, we went to this church lock-in. And I don't know if either of you are familiar. These basically, that's where it's like a church youth group, but you go to a place and they literally, you have to stay up for 24 hours and you do activities, but they constantly mix in, religious teachings and that kind of stuff. So my wife and I, again, girlfriend at the time, we thought it would be hilarious if we pretended like we were fighting all night so that all the other people in our age group would see us like bicker with each other and fight with each other. I don't know why. It's looking back on it is one of the dumbest things I've ever done. I have no idea why I even thought it would be funny, but we both thought it would be hilarious. So we were fake fighting all night, but because we were dating, we started bringing up things that kind of did bug us a little bit. And so some of our fake fighting got really intense. And we both, so you could see it from a mile away. We both got really upset over our fake fights because we were bringing up things that really were true in the relationship. We weren't like making up like you don't like grape Kool-Aid. It was more like, how come you think this other person is as important as me? Or how come you didn't do X when I wanted you to do that the other day and you decided to do Y? So even though there's a comfort and a camaraderie that comes with being friends, there is the danger of you actually know what buttons to push if you actually want to make someone upset. And so that would just be my cautionary tale with, okay, at least with a group of strangers, all the insults and the barbs are going to be generic. But if you're friends, I can really make you upset if I really want to. So just something to keep in mind for those listening, that just because you're playing with a group of friends, that could, in fact, make things worse if you're not mature and careful about it. Circle back to Chris. Anything else that you would want to bring up about either of those?
No, I think you really hit it on the head with that last statement, which is where I was going with it, is just make sure that everything stays in between the characters and not in between the players.
Yeah.
I've had some great role-playing moments where the characters are yelling at each other, and I've literally had game masters go, stop. And we're like, what? This is getting too intense. And we're both break out of character, and we're just smiling. We're like, that's where we wanted to go.
Yeah.
And the game master's like, oh, sorry, I'll shut up. We're like, no, that's good. Like, if you're making you feel uncomfortable, then it's fine to take a break. Those were some of my favorite times role-playing, but that's my play style. I don't want to have to roll dice unless you tell me I have to.
Yeah, I actively try to avoid it.
Not to.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think it just kind of thinking of a big picture, that's a way to get more intense and more regular role play. Because again, I'm going to use D&D just because it's what I play the most of. In that game, the majority of the truly intense interactions are going to be between a player or players and an NPC. It's the villain who came into the village and, slaughtered everyone or took everyone captive, or it's the political rival who manipulated things so that their candidate won, or they usurped the throne. And so, the players come to hate that NPC, the bad guy, the bad girl. They want to bring them down. But when you allow for inter-party conflict, you can get the players doing that level of emotional play with each other. So it's more likely to happen. You have a lot more opportunities for that to happen because you have all the players with an opportunity to do that. So the reward plateau is very high. I just think that the risk is high as well, that it could collapse. You get hurt feelings, the group falls apart, friendships are ending, and not to make it, over melodramatic, but as a younger player, again, my teenage year, my college years, I can absolutely believe that friendships probably could have ended over a bad session. I think now, just knowing more about how being more mellow, I guess, in my old age, like, again, I would never play fight with my wife in front of people for fun. It's just not something I would do. I like to think that we could do that and be protected, but so I guess cautionary tale to those of you out there who might be listening who are younger, not necessarily in age, but maybe in experience within the games. These emotions can be very real. And that's, for me, one of the reasons why I like to play the game. There's people who play these games, quote unquote, beer and pretzel, where you get together, it's all high level. You basically just want to kill monsters, take their stuff, go fight tougher monsters, take their stuff, ad nauseum. And that is a perfectly valid way to play. And if that's the way you like to play it, I'm happy that you are doing that. But if you're the type of group that does get more involved in the role play, those emotions can be very real. And, just like when you watch a TV show for 6 or 7 seasons and you get emotional when the characters get emotional, like the will they, won't they, they finally get together, or when you finally, the heel turn and they get to get revenge on the person who betrayed them. If you get emotionally invested in those stories, you absolutely are going to get emotionally invested in this game that you play with your friends 4 hours, every week or whatever. And don't think that those emotions aren't real and aren't valid. So just watch out for each other. Make sure everyone is still in the having fun side. Even if fun is in the moment, feeling sad or feeling angry, feeling betrayed, just, build in some time to make sure everyone's okay before you move on. There's a thing I had to do when I was training, when I was in security. Anytime we had a physical altercation with a suspect, we had a process we had to go through where we literally had a cool down period where we would make sure everyone's okay. Because people, and again, I'm going way off topic here, but there's been people that have been stabbed and they don't even realize they've been stabbed because of adrenaline. So, because I dealt with shoplifters. So you have a shoplifter, maybe ends up, have to handcuff someone, police show up, whatever. We would literally go around the room and go, Chris, are you okay? And you had to check your body. Yes, I'm okay. And then you would say, Jack, are you okay? And Jack would okay, I'm not bleeding. No arms are broken. Okay, yes, I'm okay. Because you may not think that you're upset or you're not think that you're hurt for a few minutes until that adrenaline comes down. So that's a really weird place to take that. I'm sorry. But the point is, watch out for each other. If you're playing the game together, I assume you're friends or on friendly terms. So let's make sure we end the game the same way we start the game. Any final words, Jack? Thank you. That's a great topic. I'm glad you brought both of those. But anything else you want to say before we move on?
No, completely agree. Understand the ramifications and use your safety tools. Basically, understand where it can go. Use the safety tools. Be aware before you make that choice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Completely agree.
All right. So now we're going to move into everyone's favorite part of the show, where we make complete asses of ourselves. New York Trader, I am okay. Thank you for asking. This is called Where Have My Fingers Been? And this is an improv game where we will once again prompt each other in turn, this time to create a short scene between 2, maybe more people. If you want to be Scott, bring in a third, finger puppets. So it'll be, your fingers have been X, and then we will create a little scene where we'll act them out. Ideally, they'll have a beginning, middle, and end. I usually skip at least one of those myself. But Jack, once again, you are the guest. So would you like to go first, second, or third in terms of the game here?
I will go second in terms of doing things.
Okay. So I will either prompt Chris first, or Chris will prompt me, and then you'll be the meat in the sandwich here. All right. So Chris, would you like to go first in terms of prompting or doing the act?
I'll go first with the act.
All right, I'll prompt
Fire
you. You'll
away.
prompt Jack. Jack will finish up prompting me. Okay, Chris, go ahead and sing the song, because you have to sing the song.
Where have my fingers been? I said, where have my fingers been?
Your fingers have been. Wow. I'm trying to think of so we talked about. Your fingers have been at a youth. youth group lock-in where two people are clearly fake fighting and you have not fallen for it.
Oh my gosh, can you believe that they're still fighting? It's been hours. I mean, we could just pray for them. I have been. It doesn't seem to be working. Maybe if we pray together. We have been. Haven't you been paying attention? No, I've been watching them and hoping that they get things better. Maybe you should pray harder. But I don't know if I can. Yes, you can. Let's try. And that's where my fingers have been.
You took that way more sincere. You actually cared about these people. Thank you. I appreciate. I feel loved. Thank you. All right. So you will then prompt Jack, and then again, Jack will finish circle with me.
All right, Jack. I think I got one that might be up your alley. Your fingers are watching a horror film.
All right. Well, first, you got to sing the song, though. It's very important.
Oh, my mistake.
Yeah.
Jeez. Where have my fingers been? Where have my fingers been?
All right. Your fingers are watching a horror film.
I'm scared. Really? Yeah. People with knives scare me. Why? Because they can stab you with the knife. Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, that does make sense. I would not want to be stabbed with a knife. Look, the man with the knife's coming. Yeah, okay. And it's scaring me. Yeah, that's really nice. I'm not scared by the man with the knife. If there was a man with a knife in real life here, I'd probably be scared, but not right now. But what if they took the knife and they stabbed you with it? Well, I guess that's a little bit scary. And then you bleed everywhere, and you'd fall on the floor screaming. It'd be really painful. And yeah, okay, you can shut up now. And then like imagine how much of a mess it would be for me to clean up afterwards. I mean, it's probably not. Look, shut up. But I don't know. Actually, maybe it'd be quite funny watching you bleed. But what? What? No, I just meant like as a thought, like in real life it'd be horrible. But okay, I'm not enjoying the horror movie anymore. Can we turn the horror movie off, please? No, I'm not scared anymore. It's fine.
And that's where your fingers have been. Excellent. You really took me on a ride there. It's like a bit of a roller coaster of emotion. All right.
Twist there.
All right, Jack. So, where have my fingers been? I said, where have my fingers been?
Your fingers have just discovered that their front door is a mimic.
That actually was funny. I mean, like as a thought, it was kind of funny. I'm sure it was actually horrible to him who just died by getting eaten by the door. But it was actually kind of funny. I'm not dead yet. Oh, gosh. I will save you. Just kidding. I'm now a mimic too. And that's where my fingers died? I don't know.
Good enough. Yay.
Yay! All right, New York Tater, I hope that was worth the wait, but I seriously doubt that it was. Okay, so now we're going to move into cryptozoology, and this is where we're going to take a look at a monster, usually D&D, but not always, and tonight is one of those not always. And the idea is we're going to talk a little bit about the monster, the way, like the lore around it, or how it could be used, ways we have used them in the past, and we'll brainstorm some ways that maybe we could use this monster in the future. Jack, once again, you are the guest, and you have a kind of a unusual, perhaps, asterisk monster for us to talk about. So why don't you introduce us to the concept here, kind of explain how it works, and then we will see if we can come up with some ways that we could use this monster.
So, tad sort of like self-indulgent. I've decided that we're going to talk about a Malus locus. So a Malus locus is the central entity from our horror game Locus. The idea is essentially it means bad place. And the idea is that there is a thing called a genius loci, which is a I believe, a Latin word for an ancient Greek concept of a spirit of the place. In ancient Greek, they're very much a distinct entity with a personality and things. In our one, they're more kind of like just an understanding that a place has a personality. So like certain churches might have a personality, or like certain people's gardens you might sort of like consider as being particularly serene or nice. Certain woods might have a sort of like very kind of like protective, comfortable feeling, and others might have a kind of like spooky, foreboding feeling. And the community kind of agrees on that kind of feeling to a place. And that's what we call a genius loci. A malus locus is when something terrible happens to one of these genius loci and it goes bad. And that's the kind of central theme with Locus as a horror game, where you're stuck in one of these places and it is assaulting you with all of this horrible stuff with the things that your character has done, and it's a very personal horror thing. But just in general, I thought it would be interesting to kind of bring the idea of what if the place was the monster? How did you use that in role plays? Because we've obviously designed an entire system around it, with a bunch of different things in it, but in a sort of like wider role play setting, it's not a completely foreign trope to stuff. Like, it's relatively common in horror, but you know, there's plenty of fantasy things where places are entities. So I thought that could be quite a fun one to kind of like discuss how you would go about kind of implementing that in.
Yeah, absolutely.
The games in general.
So just very quickly, New York Tater has to jump off. I completely understand. Get back to work. Thank you so much for what you do. Yes, I've got my second vaccine shot, so I'm roughly 13 days away from being at least as vaccinated, as protected as I can be. But I'm going to continue to mask and wash hands and social distance until, you know, we're on the other side of this. So again, I haven't played obviously your game, but I am also familiar through stories, media, and also other role-playing games of the idea of a place being bad. And, you know, I think the easiest is think of like a poltergeist. You know, maybe a grisly crime, murder was happening like in an old house, and the old house, not only is it just haunted, but the house itself has turned to evil. But in like media and in the games, this will generally manifest with the house working against you. So maybe doors lock behind you, windows won't open, maybe a stairway that's supposed to lead one place leads you to some other place that's, you know, more dangerous. You know, you're going to find, like kitchen knives fall out of the drawer, or the blades are turned towards you so the characters cut themselves. So is that the sort of stuff that might happen in your game's version of a bad place, where there's still things that are true to the world? So there's a house, but the house works against you. So again, so doors might close, maybe close on you, your hand, so you get injured that way. So how would it manifest to actually like hurt either psychologically or physically a character in your game?
Kind of yes and no. So to get into, and this is spoiler alert, this is kind of like director's guide stuff. This is kind of like mostly in the director's thing, but I'll try and keep it non-specific.
Sure.
So as not to ruin the game for players. You have, they kind of have layers of reality. So in the first layer, it is just reality. And then underneath that is a very similar to reality layer where you're basically in the locus and it has some powers. So things aren't quite right. People who are there can't communicate properly is a big one. And as you go deeper, the sort of the geography becomes more unreal and things become a lot nastier. And we don't actually have, it kind of depends on the locus, because part of the way locus is built as a game itself is that because it's built to be personal horror, most of the elements are kind of made by the director. But the primary way that a locus in our game, at least, aims to harm people is it kind of passively manifests monsters based on their haunts. So monsters are created based on the characters, and then they will stalk the characters. But it does kind of like, it confuses and it scares, and its initial kind of interest is as far as it doesn't, in locus they aren't sentient, they're more forces of being. So they don't think and act with purpose as much as they instinctually respond. But what they kind of are aiming to do is terrify people and then kill them later when they're terrified. So they kind of build that fear, which is because that's kind of what you as the director want to do as well. And you're not playing as the Malice Locust, but it helps the game pace. But kind of like, yeah, like all of that sort of stuff with sort of like objects moving and doors closing behind and things not going where you're planning on going. These are all things that locusts very frequently would do. And there's also, we've struggled a little bit to plan that in a couple of times as well, where it can be quite difficult to have characters going places and not end up where they want to, and have that not just feel really cheap as a DM. And also, it requires you to have a some sort of way to explain the space first, because if they go up a set of stairs and they end up in a say a kitchen, their initial response is probably just going to be, "Oh, that's weird. This house has a upstairs kitchen," rather than, "Oh, these stairs did not take me where they're supposed to." Mm-hmm. So you kind of have to pre-build that in and make sure that you somehow prime them with an understanding of the space, so you can start mixing stuff around. And a lot of the time in Locust, that's because they've had the chance to explore the space in the earlier layers where it's not all messed up, and then later on they see it messed up as the game advances. But there are other ways to do that as well. So yeah.
Okay. So again, I'll go to Chris. So based on what Jack was saying, or just sort of like similar instances, because I think, like, I know you play a lot of Star Wars, I can imagine there being like a Sith temple or something that maybe, you know, the characters might visit that has some similar haunting-esque trappings around it. So any experience with using this sort of location as monster, or this sort of overbearing, ominous environment?
A couple, not so much in Star Wars. I can't remember the name of it. It's an old module that I ran a couple times. That the idea is it's your party's going into a dungeon, but the dungeon's alive, so the rooms don't work the way they should. They kind of swirl around. And the idea is that the players are supposed to feel lost in this dungeon that's actually slowly trying to eat them, was the concept of it. So every time they enter a new room, you'd have them roll a different saving throw to see what would happen. So maybe they'd go a little insane, or, you know, maybe they'd lose some hit points, or, you know, maybe some of their armor would get, you know, messed up, that kind of stuff. That was neat. It was a really neat concept, but there was, just to me, too much dice rolling in that one. The other one that sticks out for me, and it's a pretty big location, was the old D&D Ravenloft. Because if you really read that, the whole world down there gave more abilities to the undead and took some of yours away. The different mists would move you around to different places, and trying to figure out what was causing all that was kind of the root and the idea of that whole area. Of course, then that exploded as they wrote more stories and more modules for it, but the original was really trying to figure out what was causing all that. The other one that popped in my head was the different levels of hell, because how you kind of described as they enter, things get worse and worse. And I've never played that, but I've always been interested in the concept of things getting worse and worse as you go down, you know, the different levels of hell, so to speak, or whatever you want to call it. It doesn't have to be hell, it could be something else.
Yeah.
Those are kind of my initial thoughts as you were describing things.
So the two things that sort of popped into my head, and again, I'm thinking these in terms of D&D, and I know that's not exactly what we're going for, but I think hopefully that'll help maybe get a conversation going. Is if I'm going to present this type of environmental trap or whatever against the players, there's two general avenues that we're going to take. One is that the players are now trapped there and they need to escape. And so the challenge of the players is, how do we get out of here when the stairs don't take us where we thought we need to go, or the doors don't open on the rooms that were initially behind us? Or two, there's a way to solve this. again, think of the haunted house. If you find the bones of the murdered victim, thinking like supernatural TV show. If I salt and burn the bones, the curse has been lifted. If I, maybe it's a spirit that was murdered, and if I realize, oh, this is the murderer, then the victim will feel some sense of relief and let me out so that I can go convict them or whatever. I can bring evidence against the person who's actually behind it. Or maybe there's some sort of high level spell, like I can consecrate this area to vanish the demonic spirit. So looking at it from your game, because again, I don't know, is that what the players are going to try to do? Is it a matter of we can solve this, or we can pacify this, or is it just we need to survive this?
It's both.
Okay.
So all the campaigns we've written for it, which are many more than we've released because we ran it for several years. But also just in general in the director's guide when we're talking about how to make your game, basically one of the things that we suggest you do is figure out your potential endings, and at least one way for the players to get to that ending. And we also encourage, like, hey, if they come up with a sensible sort of like idea of how to achieve this, like, let them do it. It's not you haven't hard coded that one way to do it, but like have some idea of how it can happen. But yeah, like, so typically you have stagnation, which is essentially not something that would happen to players. It's what happens if they stay in it too long and they just never leave. Yeah, like it's a in universe that's what can happen, but a party's never really going to get that ending because that suggests that you've been playing for months and just not done it, and no one's having fun at that point.
Right.
Escape, which is you get out, you figure out a way to get out, and you get out. Resolution, which is you fix the problem. Or destruction, which is you destroy the big monster that represents the Malus Locus's own haunt, and you destroy it. And that's really hard to do. It's also generally not a good thing, but it can be done. And it's sort of like an end, like it's sort of cathartic, big blowout, bad end, I guess, kind of thing. Like, but yeah, so most locuses have most of those. We're just writing one at the moment for our zine quest that doesn't have escape. So they have to resolve it to finish it, which is partly because it's designed as a one-shot. So we didn't want to have loads of different possible endings. It makes it easier to write. It means we have to have less kind of like content in there, and we can focus on having the content be good and quick.
Right.
So yeah, it can be any of them. It's usually potentially both, and it kind of depends on what the characters end up focusing on doing.
Okay.
And how they respond to the mystery, I guess.
So I guess just to sort of piggyback on what I had already said. So if I was going to use this in a game, I think probably for an escape sort of scenario, because I'm kind of a jerk when it comes to being a DMing, I would say that there's probably some object within. I'm going to use a house for both of these just because it's easier for me to conceptualize. So there's some item in the house that is the center of this effect. And maybe it's a pair of eyeglasses, maybe it's a child's doll or a toy, or it could be like a jacket that was worn when someone was murdered, whatever the case may be. And if the players find this item, then whatever's causing them to be here will let them go. But what's happened is the curse is manifested on that object, and they just want to go someplace else so that they can spread this malice. So it's sort of the trick twist ending where, oh, I found these pair of spectacles. Now we're able to leave the house, but the spectacles just wanted to go somewhere else because there's no victims now in this house. They want to go to a city and, start another bad place. If it's solving, closest, supernatural is the easiest one. You find the bones or you find the cursed object, you burn it, you salt it, you're good. But I actually really like the one I had come up with where the murder victim wants their murderer to come to justice. So maybe you have a campaign that goes along for a while, and there's like these multiple political opponents, and maybe if it's even the one that you think is the one that you would support, that doesn't seem to be overtly evil, turns out they are the one who's like a psychopath and has been murdering people since they were very young, and you can solve this old murder 20 years past, and it was like their first time murdering someone. So you find evidence that the person that you actually thought was kind of the good guy or the good girl is the secret sociopath that's been murdering people, off and on, and you solve their first murder that will lead to all the others, and you can bring them to justice. Chris, can you think of any ways that you could bring this sort of event, if not specifically from their game, but just in this idea of maybe you could bring it into a game you might run?
Yeah, I just kind of, while you were talking, was formulating kind of a concept. Bear with me, it's just a formula.
Sure.
See how it goes.
Yeah, we're brainstorming here.
Start the players off, in a big house. The entire, first game or whatever is in the house, and everything kind of keeps moving around, and they're getting frustrated as, doors won't open because, something's keeping them shut. Things keep moving around. And as the game goes, you keep giving them more and more clues until it's revealed they were actually the murder victims. They're stuck in the house, but new tenants have moved in, and they're the ones that are actually moving things around. And when they realize it's not actually really the location, it's just them, then they have to figure out what to do after that.
So
Again, just
spoilers for an old movie. It's basically The Others, the RPG.
I really like that film.
Is that what it is? I've never seen The Others.
Yeah, so totally spoiling The Others. They were the ghosts the whole time. Yes.
It's a good film. It's a good film. You should watch it.
Yeah. So again, and that's not to say what you come up with bad. It made a movie, so it's a story worth telling. I definitely think it's a one-shot sort of thing. My only fear there is how does it feel like? What's the uplifting resolution to the characters? Other maybe they get to finally rest, like their spirit gets to move on, and maybe that's the reward for figuring it out.
Or the murderer moved in, and they now get to have their justice moment.
They turn into poltergeists and start wreaking havoc. So Jack, you clearly have probably more experience with this, but other than the two we mentioned, without spoiling something you're working on, can you give us maybe an example of an escape or a way to win in one of these scenarios?
Yeah, so I'm trying to think of one that isn't actually in the books that we've written. So one we did as a test session was a spaceship, derelict spaceship. People get caught on, and the main way to kind of escape from that spaceship was you had to get to the bridge basically and send a message to the one member of your crew that was in your ship and go, come and get us. Mm-hmm. Or you could get the engines working. Because if you got the engines working, it basically pulled you back into reality because the Locus itself was a derelict spaceship, so it couldn't cope with being a working spaceship. Gotcha. So you kind of pulled yourself out as an escape. And I can't actually remember what the resolution ending for that one was because it changed about 8 times because we did it several different times. But it was, I think it might have been fixing the hull, where it had been subject to a pirate attack, and you had to, if you fix the hull, I think. There was also a thing about saving an AI and stuff in that one. We also had some, just try and think of any of the other ones we've done. A lot of the time, it's as simple as finding the right door to escape. Mm-hmm. But finding the right door or unlocking it can be really hard. Sometimes it's about, so spoilers for the Eileen Moore one that I wrote, which is a lighthouse-based one that's available on itch at the moment. Part of the escape of that is about utilizing the light of the lighthouse because the monsters can't perceive you if you're in the light, not in the light. I think it's when you're in the light, they can't see you. So you have to use the light to get to the exit. But you also usually have to be in one of the upper layers. There's a whole thing about how you cope with your own haunt and your guilt and stuff that determines what layer you're on things. Mm-hmm. But if you're in the lower layers, there's usually not a way to escape. On Eileen Moore, you had to get to the boat dock. and in the lower layers it just didn't exist. It was just a rocky cliff, like just jagged rocky cliffs, just not there. And with that one, healing that was about taking. So the idea of that story was that the island was once a place of sort of guidance. It used to be a site of pilgrimage, and then they built a lighthouse on it. And it's actually very loosely based on a real story where a bunch of lighthouse keepers just disappeared one night. Really tragically, they just disappeared. But basically, the story we wrote, which is not based in reality, obviously, was that the locusts ate them, and the idea was that the building of the lighthouse meant that the locust kind of like lost its idea of what it was, and you had to essentially take a sort of totem, an emblem of the pilgrimage days from the old ruined church, and take it up to the lighthouse to kind of signify metaphorically that its old role of a guidance was still applicable in the new lighthouse, and that it was just changed slightly, and it was about kind of like helping it to understand that trauma and move through it. That was kind of like the metaphor that we ran with that one for like how to fix it. And most of the ones we've written are some sort of metaphor about dealing with trauma, because that's kind of what creates a Malus Locus, is some form of trauma, which can, as you say, be a murder. Like, that's the really simple one. A murder happens there and it causes trauma to the place. Right. So yeah, so there's some ideas from our game, but I think the interesting thing is the concept of a place that is bad is not something that you have to play Locus for. Locus is specifically about telling scary stories, and you don't have to make it a horror story. You can just make it a really cool adventure, and you can use that concept with like the things you guys have come up with and the infinite other ideas you could potentially come up with as well in anything.
All right. Well, very cool. Well, hopefully, as always, we'll throw it out to the audience. If you have any ideas or any examples of times you have played a game where the idea of a bad place has come up, or just kind of story, horror, thriller type stories in general, that might be something you could share with us in the comment section or reply on Twitter. But we're going to basically wrap up the show here, and we do that with our question Q&A session, question and answer session. It looks like we do have a couple people watching, though I think I'm one of them. So if you have any questions for anybody on the show, Jack specifically, RPG related makes the most sense, but we can go off topic as well. Please let us know. I know there's a little bit of a delay, so while we're waiting for the audience to maybe catch up, Jack, where could people find your game? Give us your socials and like any links. And when it gets to the YouTube and the audio only, if you send me those links, I'll put them in the show notes. But where can people go to check out your game or find you on Twitter et al., etc.?
So I'm on Twitter at @tcrusading, but also we have @Cobblepath, is Cobblepath Games official Twitter. My Twitter has a lot more kind of like random stuff on it. The Cobblepath one is primarily news about what we're releasing and things. If you want our games, at the moment, Locus is the main thing that we've released. We're working on some other stuff, but Locus is available on both Drive-Thru and Itch. We recommend going to Itch if you want it, but like it's on both. Just Itch is slightly better for us. We want to support Itch. We think it's better for creators. So we want to push people towards that. But if you don't like Itch or want to add it to your Drive-Thru thing, it is available on there. If you type in Locus, it should come up. If you type in Locus RPG in Google, it definitely comes up. Yeah, that's primarily where you get it. If you find us on Twitter, there's links all over our Twitter for it. We also have a website, www.cobblepathgames.co.uk. You can sign up for a mailing list there, which will be like, it's really, really rare that we send stuff out on it, but when we do, it's like big announcements, like Kickstarter's live or this thing's released. And you can also send us a message through that, or just DM us on Twitter.
Yep.
Okay, all of that is fine.
All right. So once again, if there's anybody in chat that would like to ask any of us a question to wrap things up, please throw it into chat now while we're still waiting a little bit longer. Chris, again, where can people find you?
Twitter's easiest. Burlew _Chris. It's I check it once about every other day. I'm not super active on social media, but that's the easiest way to find me.
All right. As for myself, almost everything I do can be found at the RPG Academy, someplace, somewhere. So if you search for the RPG Academy, you're probably going to find me. I'm most active on Twitter. I do check Facebook, but not a whole lot. And then I'll throw this out. We are starting a bi-weekly or fortnightly board game night through the TTS, maybe some other things. So we've got a mailing list we're putting together. I posted it on today on my Twitter. It's a Google form. You just basically log in and say, yeah, I want to get the emails when you are going to play games, and we'll send you an email. That's the only thing it's for. So we'll just tell you what game we're playing or what nights. We're going to try to do it every other Tuesday. This coming Tuesday will be our first official night. So probably 7 or 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern time, we're going to jump onto TTS or Tabletopia or one of the three, I think of the big three, and play something. Again, this will be more board games and role-playing games. But if you want to play role-playing games, join our Discord, because we're constantly setting up one-shots and campaigns and stuff through there. So unfortunately, it doesn't look like we have any questions tonight for you, Jack, but I appreciate you coming on. I really appreciate you staying up. Best of luck with the game, and just remember to send me all those links, and I'll make sure I put them in the show notes to make it easy for people to find. Because I think we had like 5 or 6 people at most tonight watching. Our YouTube will get about the same, but our audio only will have several hundred people listen to that. So hopefully we'll get some people heading your way.
Brilliant. No, thank you for having me on. Really appreciate it.
No, I thought you did great. I thought your game sounds very interesting. I do like the idea. I'm not the biggest horror fan, but I like horror elements in other types of games. But it's something I probably will take a look at, and hopefully we'll send a few people your way.
All right. Thank you very much.
Bye, Allie.
Yeah, Chris, you may get a sale from him if no one else. So I'll look for the stop button. Everyone do kind of an awkward wave out, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.